I'm going to go ahead and run this sketch one more time. And if you recall, the mouse X and mouse Y is governing, the position of the ellipse that's being drawn frame by frame. It's 50 by 50 pixels, the diameter, width, and height of the ellipse. And we are drawing our background every single loop, right? Every single time the code is being executed, it redraws the background again. All right, so let's change some things here. So what if instead of mouse X and mouse Y governing the position of the mouse or of the ellipse that we're drawing, I'm going to go ahead and cut that out. What if we set it to 300 pixels by 300 pixels again, and then add mouse X and mouse Y to govern the size that our ellipse is being drawn. And let's go ahead and run this sketch. Alright, and as you can see, it's getting larger or smaller and stretching depending on where our mouse is, or our cursor is. Okay, cool. Now notice it's white, right? We have a default fill on this right off the bat, and I don't want that. What I'd like is I'd like to just have the outline of the circle, the stroke, and no fill, okay? So, let's see how we do that. So, by default, shapes are drawn with the fill. And so you don't actually tell it to have a fill when you want to fill. It has one. You tell it when not to have a fill. And you do that by typing no fill. Whoops. No fill. Notice I'm using camel caps here. Okay, so my F has to be capitalized. And then our parentheses and semicolon. Okay, so now we're not filling, and what I'd like is I'd like to have a stroke around this ellipse, and I want that to be white. So we'll just make a white stroke first. Okay, and we'll go ahead and run that. And there we go. Okay, easy enough, right? And it's just the outline of it. What if I want to have a color here instead? No problem. I can just go ahead and put 0 here and 0 here, and remember that's going to be full red and no green and no blue. And there we have our red ellipse stroke being drawn over and over again. Okay, cool enough. Now, if you remember up here, we have our 2 different positions that we can use for background. Let's go ahead and uncomment the background that's in setup, so it'll only be executed once, and then comment out the background and draw. That's repeatedly drawing the background over and over again while we're drawing shapes, and see what happens. Okay, there we go. We're drawing some patterns on the screen. Okay, pretty cool. The one problem I have with this is that it's covering itself up to the point where you don't even get to experience that it's a pattern anymore. If you really just, continually do this long enough, it's just going to be all red. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to set it up to have some kind of a fade effect that happens so that it starts to draw them on, and then the ones that have been on there for a little bit will fade away. Okay? There's a trick to doing that I think it's pretty cool to check out, and that's what we do is we draw another square on the screen that's black, and we cover up our display window, okay? And it will cover up everything. It'll cover up our ellipses, but we make it semi-transparent. And what'll happen is it'll be transparent when it's drawn on in the first time. The second time, and over and over and over and over again, it gets more and more and more opaque until it's no longer transparent, okay? Because it's stacking so many of those squares on as the frames continue to be drawn. So let's go ahead and try that. So I'm going to put in a fill. I want that fill to be black, so I have 0 there. Now, if we add 2 numerical arguments inside of the parentheses, it gives us access to the grayscale, and it gives us access to the alpha channel. And I'm going to go ahead and set that to 5. So it's going to be very transparent, okay? And close parentheses and semicolon. Now what are we filling? We want to fill a square. We draw squares by actually writing in rect. Just like we don't write circle for ellipse. We just make an even diameter width and height ellipse. We do the same thing with a rect to make a square. So I'm going to type in rect, and I want it to be 0 and 0 for the position, okay? That's going to be up here in the upper left corner of our display window, okay? And then if we make it the same size, it's going to cover our whole display screen. Now, there's two ways that we can define the size of our rect. We can say 600 pixels by 600 pixels. That's going to work just fine. But this isn't, I think, the best way to do this. But notice it's the size of our display window. We're drawing that rect, no problem. Works just fine. Okay, the problem with this is what if you're drawing, you know, a dozen shapes, and they're all 600 by 600, and then suddenly you want to change the size of your display window. You're going to have to change everything. Okay, so an easier way to do that is just in setup, define the size of your window, and then down here just type in width and height. Okay, width and height. Now, let's go ahead and just run this and see what happens. And there you go. You can see they're fading. Okay, so we're drawing our ellipse in, and it's not just painting everything over and over with red, but they're slowly fading out, and we're getting this nice effect. Okay, cool. So now that we have this animation here, I would go ahead and just experiment a little bit with the different values in here, you know, changing colors, changing positions. Okay, for example, we have our ellipse here and we're drawing it at 300 pixels in on our x-axis and 300 pixels down on our y. And then the size of it's being governed by our mouse position. Well, what if we try doing it to both? Like so. Okay, and running the sketch. Okay, now we're getting a totally different effect here. See that? And so that's just from, you know, switching a few things around here, but keeping the syntax correct and just getting some different effects, you know. I'm going to go ahead and change that back, undo those, and see, you know, think about what else we could do to change this. Try to, you know, change where the background is, and also really get to know the RGB values, and yeah, and then what we'll do next is we'll move on to adding a few more functions, like what happens when the mouse is clicked, or how do we save a JPEG of our pattern that we're drawing. So yeah, catch me on the next video.